Good morning, everyone. Virgotriad here. It is May 7th, 2019, and I hope everybody's having a great start to your work week. I've been wanting to do this video for a long time, but before I could do it, I needed to finish The Creature from Jekyll Island. I wanted to do some research on why it is that the libertarian movement, the sovereign citizen movement, and the patriot movement all seem to be riding on the coattails of one G. Edward Griffin when it comes to the Federal Reserve. I wanted to understand the absolute 100% anger that there seems to be and this desire to literally tear down the Fed. I needed to understand it better. And boy, did I ever get a taste of what it is that they are using as their anti-Fed conspiracy theory Bible. This is the story behind The Creature from Jekyll Island. I'm going to talk to you today about what The Creature from Jekyll Island is about, the conspiracy theory that it rides upon, and I'm going to talk to you also about G. Edward Griffin and what some of his ideology is and why this book may have been right up his alley, and unfortunately, people don't bother to look behind the scenes before they actually look at whether a book is fantasy or not. Some of you might find it interesting that there are several conspiracies that I have on the list to do videos about. One of those conspiracies is the JFK conspiracy. I've done probably 12 years worth of research on that conspiracy personally. And some of you might also find it interesting that very recently I found some footage. And in that footage, Congress actually makes a statement that JFK's assassination was indeed a conspiracy, not the lone wolf of Oswald that was claimed. I haven't gotten that put together yet, but when I do, it'll be a very interesting video. The reason I think some of you may find that interesting is because there seems to be some sort of consensus going on that all I do is push yay for the government. And the truth is that I'm not that big of a fan of the government myself. However, right is right, wrong is wrong, and the law is the law. This channel has been labeled a pro-government channel simply because we expose scams. Scam artists and con artists don't like that, so of course they point at us and say, it's the government agent, oh my God. And here we go again. Because The Creature from Jekyll Island is largely fiction, even though it claims not to be. Some of the things that are put forth in this book are pretty unbelievable. But it's also become pretty damn damaging. The Creature from Jekyll Island is the anti-Fed conspiracy theory Bible. It's the kind of conspiracy theory so all-encompassing that it explains the very roots of all modern American wars, depression, economic boom, and most importantly, the darkest, best-kept secrets of international banking. Typically, the Federal Reserve is a government entity that frustrated high schoolers in America are forced to learn about before entering adulthood and forgetting exactly what it is or why it even exists. The Fed is our central banking system, of course, that was created at the tail end of 1913, and as a response to a string of financial crises, it was necessary. It's responsible for implementing the United States monetary policy and is routinely and aptly described as boring. It's all fairly mundane and unsexy. Though hugely consequential stuff, the Fed doesn't bomb anything, invade anything, or even tax anything. But if you're a diehard libertarian or quote-unquote conservative activist, chances are decent that you're gung-ho for scrapping the Federal Reserve entirely, or at least giving its employees a harder time. "End the Fed" is a popular refrain at libertarian summits. The Federal Reserve Transparency Act of 2015, sponsored by libertarian-ish Senator and long-shot Republican presidential contender Rand Paul, he claimed he would, quote, require a full audit of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System and the Federal Reserve Banks, end quote. But for a smaller subset of anti-Fed enthusiasts, and the Fed isn't just something to be scrutinized or shuttered. It's a tool of a cabal of bloodlusting, warmongering, totalitarian bureaucrats who have helped shape the degradation of the 20th and the 21st centuries. And if you buy into that theory, you have one book in particular to thank. One of the most influential and popular documents pushing this tale is 1994's 600-page The Creature from Jekyll Island, written by author and avid conspiracy theorist G. Edward Griffin. You can read the full text at Amazon, or you can download it from Audible. It builds off a decades-old theory on the Fed's creation and its complicity in atrocity, financial or otherwise. The book soon enough took off as a bestseller. It recounts a secret meeting that took place in 1910 on Jekyll Island, a stretch of white sand beaches and beautiful landscape off the coast of Georgia. It was an exclusive boys' club gathering of American financiers and politicians who wanted to shoot the shit on monetary policy. The meeting spawned the draft legislation for the creation of the central bank. Griffin spins the trip to Jekyll Island as a birthplace for the nefarious, scary, all-powerful banking system that every decent American should want torn down immediately. The whole thing reads like a thriller. Quote, the Fed has become an accomplice in the support of totalitarian regimes throughout the world, he writes. As stated in the beginning of this study, that is one of the reasons it should be abolished. It is an instrument of totalitarianism, end quote. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this stuff caught on in the political world. Ron Paul, libertarian rock star, godfather of the Tea Party movement, blurbed and praised the book, a superb analysis deserving serious attention by all Americans. Rand's dad wrote, be prepared for one heck of a journey through time and mind. Back when now hipster clothing salesman Glenn Beck had a show on Fox News, he hosted Griffin on one of his Friday episodes and highly recommended the quote-unquote fascinating book to the audience. The book that Beck and Dr. Paul so lavishly endorsed, is, to put it mildly, full of bold claims. Those bold claims require a willing suspension of disbelief. There are few historians who would challenge the fact that the funding of World War I, World War II, and the Korean War and the Vietnam War was accomplished by the Mandrake mechanism through the Federal Reserve System, Griffin writes. An overview of all wars since the establishment of the Bank of England in 1694 suggests that most of them would have been greatly reduced in severity or perhaps not even fought at all without fiat money. It is the ability of governments to acquire money without direct taxation that makes modern warfare possible, and a central bank has become the preferred method of accomplishing that, he said. The Creature from Jekyll Island is marketed as the most important book on world affairs you will ever read. And if everything it alleges regarding the international quote-unquote money cabal were true, it absolutely would be. Alas, we theorized a strategy dubbed the Rothschild formula, in which the world's money cabal deliberately encourages war as a means of stimulating the profitable production of keeping nations perpetually in debt, Griffin warns. This is not profit-seeking, it is genocide. It is not a trivial matter, therefore, to inquire into the possibility that our elected and non-elected leaders are, in fact, implementing the Rothschild formula today, end quote. The fatal flaw in Griffin's analysis and breathless fear-mongering is, as is the case with so many prevalent conspiracy theories, that it takes a grain of truth and turns it into a salt mine of utterly laughable bullshit. Quote, "The meeting happened. There was a meeting at Jekyll Island, and it did play a formative role. But the problem with stories like this is that they try to reach it to a single incident," end quote. Author and Reason magazine editor Jesse Walker told the Daily Beast. Griffin is at the point where he can reduce things too much to a certain narrative where the mustache twirlers are behind everything, end quote. Walker, who is also an expert on the grand tradition of the American conspiracy theory, had observed that, quote, "if you go into a movement like Audit the Fed or End the Fed, you'll see people citing that book there. I think I've seen it cited more so than any other anti-Fed conspiracy book," end quote. Quote, "There is a reasonable reason, to want the Fed to be more transparent," end quote, he continued. "But as with any movement, there are people who will look for conspiracy instead," end quote. As for labeling his work a conspiracy theory, Griffin would most certainly and most strongly object. Quote, "There is nothing about my work that merits being classified as a conspiracy theory," end quote. This is what Griffin said. He was responding to critics in 2004. Quote, "In modern context, it is customary to associate the phrase conspiracy theory with those who are intellectually handicapped or ill-informed, using emotionally loaded words and phrases to discredit the work of others to be rejected," end quote. Yes, ad hominem attacks on anyone's written work should be rejected, as should the shadowy money wanta of economy crashers, democracy subverters, and war profiteers. It's only such a fascinating global power, if only, such a fascinating global power existed, just so it could be torn down. And that is ending out, that last little bit that I read is ending out this article on the Daily Beast, in which Mr. Walker talks about Mr. Griffin's book. I would have to agree with what was said here, largely because of doing a lot of research on this gentleman, G. Edward Griffin. Mr. Griffin is an avid conspiracy theorist, and I mean, it's not just normal conspiracy. I'm going to take you through the wild ride of G. Edward Griffin and his conspiracy theories for just a moment, so that before you get into reading The Creature from Jekyll Island, and before you get into believing that that is the absolute Bible of the Federal Reserve and all of its shady dealings, you know exactly what is at the heart of this man. So let's take a look here at what Mr. Griffin actually believes. So in 1973, Griffin wrote a self-published book, The World Without Cancer, and released it as video, and he updated it in 97. Mr. Griffin does not believe that cancer is an actual disease. He believes that there's some form of metabolic derangement, meaning a metabolic deficiency, vitamin deficiency. This is my third battle with cancer. My first one, I was 22. I can promise you that there's no metabolic deficiency that is creating cancer. It is a mutation of cells. It's insulting to even read what he has as his supposed claims, with absolutely no verifiable sourced proof whatsoever. He's not a physician. He doesn't work with cancer patients. He has no scientific evidence of any sort. Complete and total quackery is what we're talking about here. To make matters worse and more insulting, in 2010, Griffin engaged in HIV/AIDS denialism, claiming that HIV doesn't exist. And then in 2012, he topped it all off with "What in the world are they spraying?" claiming that the chemtrails that were hanging over cities like Los Angeles, that are actually contrails, were a bunch of chemicals put out there to kill a bunch of people. Although no one's ever been able to make it make any sense to me how it is that supposedly these rich, wealthy cabal people are not breathing the same air. See, you put stuff in the air, you put stuff in the water, it goes everywhere. Now, you might be able to drink bottled water, but you can't breathe bottled air all the time. That just doesn't make any logical sense. So when we talk about this man who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, we're talking about a conspiracy theorist that strongly believes in conspiracies that have scientific evidence behind them. You ask any other cancer patient or any party that has HIV or AIDS, and you will find out real quick that we know exactly what the diseases entail. It's a complete and total insult to not only the patients, but the scientific community, who has spent ages trying to protect those of us that are sick, and trying to assist in making better medications and treatments. It's disgusting. The Creature from Jekyll Island is an opinion based on a loose particle of truth that was built into a total and complete conspiracy. And for those of you that read it, I would caution you about putting too much stock in it ahead of time, because you'll be disappointed. For those of you that use it as an anti-Fed Bible, do yourselves a favor and go back and research some verifiable, sourced, actual history. And I think you're going to see where the cracks start to show. I hope everybody enjoyed this, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Bye-bye.